there is nothing wrong with your television, computer, or phone screen. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make an obscure reference, we will try to explain it. If we wish to make dad jokes, we will not judge you for groaning. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can desaturate the image, make it oversaturated. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour and a half, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. Except for the video feed Mikey is in, making multiple software programs work together at once is tricky, and really it's impressive this doesn't happen more often. We repeat, there's nothing wrong with your screen. You are about to participate in a great conversation about loss, trauma, and magic. You're about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from WandaVision to the Real World Theology Podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about here is, it's Marvel coming back after a 1-year break, right? They didn't do anything for 2020. And I feel like maybe this is the best thing that could have happened to Marvel after the Infinity Saga and Endgame and all of the sort of buildup that was, is just to take a break and let it breathe. And then come back with something that's, not only is it transformative and completely different from like anything we've ever seen before, but it's also, unique and different within the Marvel world. It's something that it's definitely the most I would say probably the most well-regarded of any of the Marvel shows that have come out so far. And just it being such a very different thing, a 9-hour, a 9-hour look at
saga,
a character, a 9-hour saga. Yeah, there we go. Of a character through the lens of TV shows of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 90s, and 2000s. Like that's a little bit, that's weird, right? That's definitely transformative and unique and something that we haven't seen before. And so I think that all of that together means that we've got this is a really weird one to try to sort of put in a box.
No, I get that.
Though they do put it in a 3x4 box for the first.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Aspect ratio matters.
Yeah.
It's still an inside joke, which is kind of cool. I mean, there's lots of cool things about this show, right? Like, it almost feels like there's something for everyone, and sometimes there's everything for everyone, which is very rare. And I know I'm being either cryptic or vague, but I'm actually curious.
Something for everyone except Mephisto fans.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Well, I mean, even then, I mean, they could.
They did.
You could hope that if that was not the case, then there's only something even better waiting, right? It's the thing we got with the Mandarin, right? Hopefully something even better than you were thinking before, because it was so incredibly disappointing the first time, but almost pays off the disappointment that I had with Iron Man 3 with something better down the road.
And that made Shang-Chi better, right? Like the fact that was sort of a low point of who Trevor Slattery was, but like pay it off in Shang-Chi is he all of a sudden is this great character, I mean, I want to love it more than I did. I mean, because I did really like it. And I know we're not talking about that movie specifically, but conceptually, how people will feel about the show, or something that people can take away from the show, is that maybe Marvel has a plan. My hesitation is I'm not sure that was ever Marvel's plan. They were just like, wait a minute, didn't we already do this? How do we fix this? And I mean, they did it in, I wouldn't say a masterful way. It wasn't how Endgame came together. Endgame was masterful. I would say it was pleasantly surprising. And so I'm hoping that for the people who are upset about Mephisto, someone will think that at some point Marvel will run out of things, right? And they're going to have to include everything at some point, because we're going to be making these movies forever. Until the heat death of the universe. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, until like there's just
people
not telling stories.
James Gunn only has one more Guardians in the can, right? And then he said he's done. So he's going to have to find other B and C tier heroes to have in movies, right?
Well, that's the thing. I don't believe that either, right? Like, anyone telling me they're done with a thing that makes money for their thing, I mean, you're done with it for now, right?
Yeah.
Like you're done with it for now, and then sitting at home watching other people make movies for 6 years in this universe and being like, gosh, that gave me a great idea about whatever. And then Disney's like, yeah, I've got money. And they're like, oh, I like money. And then it happens all over again. I mean, and that's fine. I mean, like, I want people to get paid for their work, right? Like, I want creatives to be rewarded and compensated for being creative and telling good stories. So that doesn't bother me. It just, the idea that someone is done is, I'll believe it when, I mean, not even when they're dead. They probably they wrote something and they put it in a vault and we find it after they're dead and then they make it separate. It's like one of those things. I don't even know if death can stop like some of these things.
Well, and speaking of which, Agatha House of Harkness has been approved or greenlit at Disney for Disney Plus. Like there's an Agatha Harkness spinoff. Like obviously they were putting her in Westview to hold her there for later. Like that was on purpose. They didn't. They knew in advance that she was a popular character, and they didn't want to get rid of her. So obviously that was on purpose. But the fact that they almost immediately confirmed, well, I guess not almost immediately. It was like later that year, confirmed that there is actually a spin-off show for Agatha coming all along.
I just love the fact that things are so intertwined at this point. If people have not done it already, we're going to start getting legitimate, like, dissertations written about this content.
Yeah.
And people who are, like, their job title at some point is going to be, like, the MCU continuity expert.
Yeah.
Like, they will be able to answer all this stuff. I mean, and why not me, right? Why not me?
I mean, right now it's Kevin Feige, right? Like, he's just holding all this in his head.
Maybe he is. Maybe I assume he's got many people who are holding this in their head, and he goes to them, and they're all doing the thing that you have the. Oh, there's that title of the person who's making sure everything on the set is consistent between shot. It's the shot-to-shot person. Like you make sure you don't have like a major TV show with a Starbucks cup and a Game of Thrones thing. Like the person who does that, or person who makes like you had 3 buttons buttoned, it's not 2 buttons in the next shot. There's people who do that. They have a name, and I forget, and I apologize to those people because I know they're all listening to the show. But I'm sure he has a whole team of people. The thing I'm curious about, and you guys may know this, and I just simply do not. So it really is kind of a spur of the moment question, but I'm wondering how intentional Disney or Marvel, I guess, in this branch of Disney, was in making TV shows the whole time. Like I'm wondering if there was like they were planning on making these movies and at some point they were like, it's not like maybe they're not going to make enough money, or hey, we have a platform now, so do we definitely need to create more content for the platform? Or like I said, this was going to be I guess it couldn't have been a movie because if they had 9 to 10 hours of content, it's hard to imagine them making it that way. I'm kind of curious how intentional these TV shows were. This is the first TV show we're covering in the MCU, and they're starting to weave pretty well together, even though you always have those questions of like, where are the other people while this was happening. So I'm curious. I mean, do we know like if this was the plan? Because it does seem like some of these characters, kind of like you're talking about with Agnes, like the plan is, oh, she's popular, so now she's getting a show. Not, we knew she was going to have a show the whole time. Does that difference make sense?
Yeah.
Because I feel like the movie. The last thing I'll frame it with is I feel like with the movies, they generally know. Like there's not like, oh gosh, let's make a second one, or oh man, let's make a whatever movie. Like it's like they know what the movies are, 4 or 5 years out. The TV shows kind of seem not as planned.
Yeah, I think. Again, I know about as much as you, but if I was to hypothesize, I'd say, yeah, they were making good on the opportunity with Disney Plus They're like, we know we have to have content. We know we're heading to a multiverse. This will fit well in these spaces we have here to help feed that, but also then we can keep making them if it turns out well, right? Because you could have WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, and none of them ever reference each other. But if they keep doing well, then it's like, okay, we can make them all play together and continue from there. But it looks like they're doing pretty good. I think.
Well, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I think also part of the strength of Marvel has always been that they do sort of connect, but loosely, right? You don't have to have watched What If to watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but based on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, but based on the trailers for the new movie, like it seems like most likely they're going to reference it, right? And so you will get more out of the movie if you have seen the TV show. Probably the same with WandaVision, since we're talking about that show right now. That seems like the sort of thing that we're going to really have, watching WandaVision and then watching Multiverse of Madness is probably going to be a more rewarding experience than watching Marvel or Doctor Strange by itself, because I think that there's going to be some development to the character of Wanda that we aren't going to necessarily get within the movies that we got in the TV show, and they'll have to do that in some way. So it's one of those things where they've always made it within Marvel. They've always made it so that you can watch the movie if you want to by itself. You don't have to watch the others, but if you do watch the others, you'll like it better.
I was actually hypothesizing maybe the opposite now. I definitely think in the beginning, the first 10 years, or rather, whatever it was, the first, however many years, it was definitely like almost every movie about a TV show or a sequel or anything. What you could tell, one of the goals, either a producer or someone came in and said, we have to allow this to be a standalone because you want to make money, right?
Right.
So you can't have people watch this one and not have any idea who the characters are. I mean, you could reward people for having seen more, but lots of the early Marvel films are like the first part of the film is a reintroduction to the character. A solidifying of the character for people who are already familiar, a reintroduction or a new introduction for people who had not seen the previous film or films or TV shows or whatnot. I think they gave up on this. I think somewhere, and not that long ago, I think somewhere probably, what phase are we? We just finished phase 3, right?
Right.
I think at the beginning, probably of phase 3, I think they just stopped. Except for obviously when they were doing new characters.
Right.
I think if they had other characters in most of they were like, you've seen these people, you know who they are. I think the reason I bring this up is because, like many things, the cultural relevance. I think it can be so assumed that people either know who these people are because of just general cultural references, pop culture kind of stuff, or that people have literally probably, like, it's rare to find someone who has not seen any of these movies and have no context for who any of these people are. Right. And I think at some point they're like, it doesn't matter. Like, people are going to go see these movies and they may have seen them and they may not, their parents may not have seen them. Their parents are going to pay to take them to go see the movie.
Right.
So we don't have to do this anymore. Which I think is astounding for a continuous set of, universe films that have been going on as long as these have.
Well, it's just like you said, like this is in the cultural zeitgeist. Like we know these characters because they're Saturday Night Live sketches. They're they're on the side of buses, and they're we see them referenced in books and TV shows and everything. We know who they are, even if we haven't seen any of these movies. It's like you don't need to reintroduce Sherlock Holmes. We know he's a master detective. Like, okay, obviously, we don't need to reintroduce Thor for the same reason, because we know that he's a Norse god and he's got a hammer. Like, we know those things about this character. Don't have to reintroduce them. And if you show up and you watch this movie and you see, oh, he doesn't have a hammer, he has an axe. Like, that's not going to break your understanding of the movie. You're just going to be like, oh, that's interesting. And if the movie's good, you're going to go with it, right? So I think both of those things are true. You know, it is in the cultural zeitgeist, and that's why people enjoy it and can watch it without. But again, knowing the history of these things gives you a more fleshed out and a better understanding. So when we come to a show like WandaVision, and we have characters that we've met before, if you have seen, gosh, everything since Age of Ultron, right? Basically, if you've seen those, you know who all of these characters, well, who both of these characters are, the main characters in the story, and you know why it's important that they're, you know, here together in this. But then they do also throw in like who these people are, and in little bits and little pieces. And I think it's probably it has probably benefited from the fact that neither Wanda Maximoff nor the Vision have been the main character in any of the shows that they've been in. But to actually be able to watch them with that in mind gives you a better sort of experience, a more full experience than not having seen it. But I think you could probably watch WandaVision and understand the story at least without having seen Age of Ultron, or I guess Infinity War would be the other big one that you would need to see to have a full experience. So,
yeah. Well, with this one in particular, you've already mentioned how it does a lot. I mean, we didn't really know what to expect, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, what is how are they going to take something that is generally loved and derided for being, popcorn shoveling, generic, punch them in the face action movies, which, those people are stupid and wrong. Like, how do you take something that seems like it was created for the big screen and move it down to, the small screen?
Well,
though,
they took that literal,
admittedly,
didn't they?
yeah. How do you take a story that you've been telling and really dive in?
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what we were going to get into, and I was very surprised at how into it I was. They usually, most of the Marvel films don't leave a lot of room for mystery.
Mm-hmm. So
this one, you're watching, and as much as I don't like to have to wait for TV, and again, different discussion for a different time, as much as I don't like to do that, it was interesting to be like, I need to see what happens next episode.
Right. Mm-hmm. Man, when I was rewatching WandaVision for this, I all of a sudden had this really strong flashback to the frustration of that end credits sequence coming up. Like, that sort of like, don't stop it. And then like watching the whole thing, thinking maybe this time is the time they'll put a post-credits scene on it. And of course they never did, except for the one time, right? But like that feeling of frustration when it ends, like I hadn't felt that since I was a kid, and watching stuff in first run back then, because like all of the other stuff, it's just been like one right after the other, or something where it resets at the end of the episode and you don't need to necessarily tie one onto the next.
Mm-hmm.
So how did it differentiate itself, or how did WandaVision differentiate itself from a regular, I'd say 2-hour film or 90-minute film, but they're all running close to 240 now. For you, Ryan, like what were the biggest differences between you sitting in a theater watching self-encased story about one character versus 9 episodes of a character study going a little bit deeper?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like what David was saying. It's like, oh, this isn't finished. I have to retain this part of the story. And then, of course, the internet would ruminate and dissect and pull apart and tell you this is what has to happen next, and to some degree of success and mostly failure. But, it's definitely a different experience. And then on top of that, having a different style and format each time. Okay, what show are they going to do in the style of next? Oh, are we going to get to color yet? Are we going to get full screen? I'm kind of nerdy on that kind of stuff as well. But, you know, it was different. It was a prolonged experience. It was something that if you wanted to experience it, you had to experience it for even longer than just in front of the screen, right? It's like,
that's a good point.
It had to carry you through that week to the next one, or you had to just wait, have the internet blowing up all the time, throwing off sirens, and then you'd try and binge it all at once. But
and insisting that no, this time it really is Mephisto.
Yes. all the theories, yeah, definitely, and you can play with that as much or as little as you wanted. I didn't really. I was just like, I trust them. I'll see what they have, and then I'll judge at that point. I don't need to guess which cape thread they might see or symbol they might have thought they saw, that kind of a thing. So,
well, I definitely love the fact that I wanted to come back. Well, I'd say each week, but cards on the table. We basically waited till the series was over because, again, I can't stand. I can't stand waiting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I wanted to hit play immediately after. I was like, you know, we would be watching after the kids get in bed, and we knew we'd have time for one, maybe two. But when you're like, it's 10:30, do you want to start another one? You know, you have that. You have that like look that you have when you're just waiting for someone to give you the approval. And no, oh, but you mean that we have to wait until like 3 days from now when we have time again to see the next thing? Like that's what you're telling me right now. You'd rather sleep than know what's like what story or what TV time period they're going to be in next week. That's what you're telling me right now.
You don't care about the guy in the beekeeper suit? What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm, there's a lot of TV in there's a lot of TV in this, and by that I mean the stuff that makes you want to come back each week, which I sometimes I don't mind on principle, though I do mind when people abuse it, and I feel like we have probably had this conversation to some level before, but when your TV show is only what's going to happen next, it not completely, it often dampens the rewatch value, because once you know what happens next, your story's not strong enough, then you don't care. Like, you're never going to rewatch it because you know what happens next. I'm looking at you, Walking Dead. So the thing I liked about this is that I would still go back and rewatch this show, because there's still a lot going on. And even though from time to time there were things that you could tell that it felt like they put in the show just to make the internet explode or implode. Like when Evan Peters showed up as Pietro Maximoff.
Yeah.
I don't think we're done with that yet. I think that there's going to be more to that. I think that was the first echo of the multiverse. I think there's more there.
Still working.
It still works.
It was Mephisto.
It still works. David's there. David's all over it. You can find more of his stuff at davidsmarvelconspiracytheories.org.net.
UK. Yep.
So but yeah, so it's doing that, and it's working, because we're still talking about it. We're still wondering if there's threads that we haven't picked up yet. I mean, obviously it ended in a way that's going to set up a movie that we've now had a trailer for, and we're going to all go watch. So there's some of that, and I thought on a scale of pandering to done well, I thought it was leaned more towards the done well scale. And when you take it, you're going to realize. Well, for me, I realized that the reason that that was the case was because, again, there's meat on these bones, right? This isn't just like a baddie of the week, or like some kind of simple resolution. There are things being dealt with in this show that I think this show could have come out any time and been good.
Yeah, but
it came out in the middle. I don't want to put time frames on it. It came out during, well into a global pandemic. It came into, it appeared in a world that was dealing with trauma, people losing friends and family. So individual trauma, people were losing their ability to live life as normal, trying to understand how to cope with things that were always changing, and information that was confusing, and trying just to do your best to keep your family safe, and keep your sanity a lot of the time. And so there's that collective trauma, and what we do with that. And that's sitting right at the heart of the show. And I think was probably, while the week to week sensationalism of who showed up, what's going to happen next, was definitely the thing that we were talking about at the time. I think it's being remembered for how it portrayed things that we don't often get to really dive into in a movie setting, because there are things that have lasted the length of the MCU, right? Like Tony Stark's PTSD is something that is a thread from Iron Man to the time of his death.
Spoilers,
right? And then the linger effects of his decisions continue on, right?
Right.
So it's not that there are no ways to have these character explorations in a film, but WandaVision is able to dive deeper, quicker, and more specifically. So when you were starting to realize what this show kind of was about, did it strike you as odd that Marvel would be the show, or Marvel would be the universe, the content company that is trying to deal with trauma and escapism, or did it kind of fit right in for you?
I thought that the exploration of trauma within the show, it was remarkably deft, and I don't know whether to attribute that to a writer that we haven't heard from before. Jack Schaefer, as far as I can tell, hasn't really done anything big like this before, or to maybe this was the whole point of it when Kevin Feige originally came up with the idea, or whoever did it. But I do think that you're right. It was so deft. It was so different. It was not something that we would expect out of Marvel. It was not something we would expect from anything Disney. This is sort of an out there thing for them, sort of in general.
Depth-wise,
I think, and I think that the biggest part of all of that is how it works on multiple levels, right? So you're dealing with the trauma of Wanda, but you don't even know that that's what this whole thing is about until episode 4 or 5 or whatever. You don't know that that's the cause of all of this. You start getting an inkling when you see the beekeeper, but you don't really know that that's what causes all of this until even later than that. And so it works because it's already dealing with those things at the beginning, and just it's sort of getting louder as an undercurrent the whole way through. And the fact that it's able to hold your attention even at that point, even when you don't know what's going on, and you sort of don't know if anything is going on, is just a testament to the fact that this is well written, and each individual episode is a strong episode on its own. I rewatched the I Dream of Jeannie episode, basically, and it's just a fun sitcom episode with this really sad, melancholic undertone underneath it, of dealing with trauma and dealing with what the world around you is with when you've lost something. It's definitely got a lot of emotional currency with regard to grief. I mean, there is, of course, the infamous line, "What is grief but love persevering?" And that, I think, goes all the way back to the beginning and sort of informs all of the stuff that front loads this series, and gives it a different meaning and a different sort of understanding right off the top.
Yeah, and it's a weird way to go about it. I don't know. It could have been a lot more clean cut, a lot more straightforward, right? Just the escapism. But it's almost like Wanda doesn't even understand what she's doing. So you kind of have that portrayal of a psychological break, like multiple personalities kind of thing. But it doesn't just stick with Wanda. It jumps to, okay, Vision doesn't know what he is, right? That whole identity crisis. And then you have Rambo.
Yeah,
Monica Rambeau.
She's dealing with, I was waiting for my mother to come back from surgery, and then she's gone now that I've come back. And like
now all of a sudden she's been dead for 5 years.
She's blipped for 5 years, and what that means for her life and her duty. And you know, you can see her like getting into reckless behavior, essentially, right? Like some people do. It's like Jimmy Woo. He's like, be careful. And the first thing she does is shove her hand right into this unknown thing that she knows is powerful and, you know, is messing with people's minds, all sorts of things. And she's just like, oh, it did it. I got thrown out. I got a great truck. This is going to get me through. The truck starts to like melt and dissolve into something else. Oh, I'll just walk through myself. It's fine. I know it's been changing my molecular structure and things, but it's like she doesn't feel like she has anything to lose anymore, and she's acting out in that way. So,
well, and she explicitly talks about that because like she mentions, I forget which episode it is, but it is sort of told to her by Wu or somebody that, you know, if you go back in there again, we don't know what's going to happen, you know? And she's like, if my mom died, like this is the same sort of thing that I would do too. Like she's trading in the same emotional currency that Wanda is, just maybe in a slightly more, you know, mature way.
You even have Agatha dealing with her past trauma, right?
Oh yeah, that's
true. She had her mom and pretty much everyone around her turn on her. Now, to be fair, that could have been self-inflicted to some degree, kind of a thing.
Right.
But definitely, you know, has reasons for having her issues, I guess you could say. But yeah, there's that. And then there's also the head of Sword, right? And he's dealing with all the people that got blipped and being in charge. But then he's trying to claim victimhood for himself to justify his aggressive tendencies and attacking Wanda and everything else, when the tech support, essentially, right? She's a doctor. Kat Dennings' character. She's
Darcy
like,
Lewis.
Wanda is causing it, so we should calm down Wanda, and that'll fix the problem. No, we should shoot. We should blow things up.
We should blow stuff up.
Right.
So I think with that 9-episode structure, they got a lot of nuance and a lot of different angles to look at trauma, which I thought was handled well, that they could look at the same thing in so many ways.
Yeah. Well, again, and I think it is especially resonant because of, you know, what the world is going through. Right? Like when you're going through trauma, when you experience other people going through trauma, it makes you feel typically less alone. It also might make you feel depressed because it might also confirm your thoughts that everything does suck and is awful. And I don't want to cast a net too big here because this is probably someone's PhD thesis, but I'm pretty sure that the MCU, either directly or indirectly, especially dealing with the Infinity Stones, basically becomes a cinematic parallel for at least America, like dealing with its collective trauma from the 2016 election. And I'm not even trying to say that because, you know, it's trauma because of who won. I'm just saying it's trauma because of the fighting that it caused, right? You basically have someone coming in saying that they're gonna like snap their fingers and half the people, like half of all life, a divided country. And so like half the people are gonna feel like they lost no matter who wins. And so then what you're doing, all the fallout in the MCU from then has been kind of high level grief, like, oh, it sucks that we couldn't stop them. Oh man, it stinks. And you get some of that in Endgame. where you start to see what the lives of people look like. But the movies that have come out since, and especially the TV shows, have started to deal with like what did that look like day to day? What does it look like to try to suddenly incorporate twice the population back into the earth? Like, where do these refugees go? What happened to my, what happened to my kids when I got, blipped? What happened to my parents, while I wasn't blipped, or, things like that. And like I said, that's even before COVID, which I think would be the most direct way to correlate how people are relating to this show. Like I said, the anxiety, the apprehension that people have basically felt since around 2016, I think it is all sitting in the back of our minds, and it does make us want to escape. It does make us very glad that even though I can't be in a TV show, that I can immerse myself in a WandaVision, and a Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I mean, in these shows that do not seem to ever stop, and I don't have enough time to watch them all, which I love because I just want to sit in front of my TV because the world is so hard and it's so complicated and it's bringing me so much anxiety. I just need to escape. I need to watch more Mandalorian. I need to watch Boba Fett. I don't even want to watch Boba Fett, but I know I have to watch it. Like, how am I going to watch The Witcher? Oh, there's 2 seasons of it now? And Ted Lasso. It'll make me feel good, but at least I won't be in reality when I'm feeling good. Like, this is like the TV discussion all over again, and WandaVision is just encapsulating this. Like, what do you do when you experience something that's so so overwhelming that you literally just shut down? And this is what people were worried about. This is what psychologists, counselors were worried about, especially in a pandemic. We're already suffering. Then we suffer more because the pandemic is happening. And then we have to isolate, or we should isolate to prevent, physical death. But at the same time, we're also slowly mentally deteriorating. And we can see Wanda slowly mentally just losing her grip on reality the more she isolates. She thinks that she can make her life wonderful by creating Billy and Tommy, and the Vision isn't a machine anymore. He's just like the cool, happy husband, and they're living, these wonderful dreams. And even in her idealized world, the shell that she puts up, these walls that she puts up, you can't escape reality. So no matter how many Disney shows you watch, the world sometimes still sucks.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of. You guys aware of Miss Havisham and the I think it's an Edgar Allan Poe book. I'm not sure if that's exactly true. But Miss Havisham.
That's why I don't have a podcast on books.
Sure. Yeah. It's a short story. It's not actually a book. Anyway, but Miss Havisham, her I think she's jilted at the altar at the last minute, or her husband dies or something like that, and she just basically stops her life at that moment. She stays in her wedding dress. She stays in her room. She even has her servants stop the clock at a particular moment so that like time does not progress past the moment of like her greatest trauma, right? And we're in talking about this trauma and this grief, I keep going back to that line of Visions, like Alicia Grauso says, she's the features editor at Screen Rant. She says, I've been thinking a lot about why WandaVision's "but what is grief if not love persevering" line has rocked so many people. I suspect it's that we're now a world of grieving deferred, and that line and episode offered a tiny bit of catharsis that's been collectively denied us. She's talking about the pandemic here, but I think you're right. I think it goes back further than that, maybe way further than that. Because I feel like we've sort of, maybe even since 9/11, been living in a world of like one trauma and crisis ties exactly on to the next trauma or crisis, which ties exactly on to the next trauma or crisis. And all of that sort of lines up against each other and gives us this fatigue about it. And we don't get to finish grieving or mourning because the world is weird and it doesn't get unweird, and so we can't finish grieving or mourning that. And so we're consistently and constantly grieving and mourning the loss of a life not lived or not realized. And I think sort of the inverse of what is grief, if not love persevering, is what is love, if not hope for the future. And so because we don't have maybe as much hope for the future, that love is diminished, and that just pours more into our collective trauma, makes it more difficult to give up the world that we're creating around ourselves through the shows that we watch, or through the games that we play, or whatever, the social media that we scroll through, the social media persona that we create. We want to, just like Wanda lives inside her memories of Vision, like we want to live inside this fake version of ourselves. And it sort of validates the fact that Wanda has taken refuge in these sitcoms, that and gives it power and strength, because it's the world that we're living in as well.
Well, I also feel that the answers to that that I find in these TV shows, while inspiring in the moment, tend to ring hollow. Because, and I'm going to paint with very broad brushes, and I'm going to admit that I'm large swaths of generalities, right? Lots of times in these movies, the call to keep going is, remember that so and so loves you. Like, remember that you have your family. Remember that there are people who care about you. Remember that it's going to get better. There are these very, these things that, or I don't know, they feel hollow to me, and maybe it's because I'm a Christian, or just maybe because it seems very like just trying to placate someone, because things are going to get, you have to stop feeling this way, because you have to understand things are going to get better. Are they? Like,
in this world?
I mean, like, if you try to get Wanda out, but be like, no, you have to join reality. Things are going to be better. Like what's gonna, like, you can say, well, pain may recede over time. That's a true, that tends to be a true statement. It with enough time and distance, like, pain typically does not hurt as much all the time. But that doesn't mean things are going to get better. It doesn't mean like there's not going to be any more pain in that reality. So why come back? Like, oh, well, there are people who care about you. Yeah, the people who care about her, like Vision, and apparently these children that she's manifested, like, so she has those people. So why come out of there? Like, almost all the arguments are tough, outside of be more altruistic, stop wallowing in your pain because you're hurting other people. And stop hurting other people is great, but what's the motivation to stop hurting other people if you're the one who has to take the pain on, and you don't feel like you can hold any more pain? Not to say that that's a valid excuse to hurt other people, but for the person hurting, if you feel like you can't go on, telling them just have some more pain, like, it's not a great, it's not a great convincer. So
And I think going along with that is a lot of Christians would say, well, God works all things together for the good of those who follow him. And yes, that's true, but you don't see that in the moment. That's something that only works in hindsight. You cannot put that on somebody and expect them to feel better. Like, that doesn't work in the moment. It only works in hindsight.
Too. Like, good doesn't mean you're rich and don't have pain. Good is like,
some people would say that.
Yeah, but I mean, good. So good in our faith is whatever brings the most glory to God. Which doesn't necessarily mean that you get to sit fat and sassy. So, like, Ryan, this is where I'm going to intentionally put you on the spot.
Okay.
And say, if what we typically get is at best placation or humanistic, theistic or whatever it's called, moral therapeutic deism,
bumper
like,
sticker,
if that's what we
platitudes,
if that's what we typically get from like most Marvel shows, And it does make us feel good in the moment. What actual hope do we have in a world that is constantly being bombarded with trauma and grief? No pressure.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair to the show, it didn't really, give her much of that. Most of the time it was Rambo just saying, this is your truth, just at least face it, kind of a thing. And then near the end, they're like, well, are you the villain if you're putting all these people through your pain that you're obviously having?
I want to come back to that too. So
it steered a little bit away from those, so I'll give it credit for that. But where do you find hope when you've got all this pain and you don't see that this is going to change or end in any realistic sort of way? And especially in her situation where it's like you said, Vision was her support structure. That was who she was going through Endgame and Infinity War and all these other traumas with, right? And so she's trying to regress. She's like, we huddled together and that's how we get through. That's kind of where we find our stability in this, turmoil. And then she's lost that. That's no longer a viable anchor, right? So the best place I would say to find hope or to move on, deal with it, is hopefully through Christians, because the real reassurance that God gives us is we don't go through things alone, right? He is going through it with us. He is not abandoning us in those times. And whether you have a relationship with him or not, he uses his people sometimes to be there, to speak for him, to be his hands, his feet, his ears, that sort of a thing. In Job, he has friends who come and they just sit, right? And they just listen. And after that, they become bad friends and they try and tell him platitudes and what he's doing wrong and things like that, which doesn't help with his hope. But the better parts where Job is doing the right thing, where his friends are doing the right thing, is just to say, God is in control, but he's here with me. He knows what I'm going through. He provides for me when I need provided for. He's going to continue to do that. If he's not, there's a greater purpose, kind of a thing, which again doesn't make him get up and start throwing confetti around and having parties. It's just he's not willing to kill himself like his wife suggests, right? It's treachery. It's not a escape jail card kind of a thing, but it is a way through at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea that we live in a world that the creator of the universe cares about. Right? So when there is pain, when there is suffering, when there's trauma, just like you said, Ryan, God is still with us. God cares. And like we joked, I think things are, spun on a compass that points to eternity, right? The now is important, but it still is just the now. It is not the eternal. And there are constant metaphors. I mean, not just metaphors, but actual resurrections, birth, death, resurrection, birth, death, resurrection. That's the story of Scripture over and over again. And our grief is often the death. But love persevering is the resurrection. And I feel like I'm not trying to be vague or cryptic, but with trying to keep it in the bounds of, not talking about this for days and days. Those are the things that come to mind. God cares. pain is real,
but
redemption, resurrection is coming. And resurrection might not, resurrection might not resurrect you into, no pain ever. Well, it's not going to resurrect you into no pain ever again. At least here,
yet.
like in this world, but one day it will.
And I think you make a good point there, talking about like it won't necessarily make everything all better right now. It probably won't. We might get broken up. We might, be taken apart. We might become different as a result of it. And I think that's, people were making jokes about the ship of Theseus thing when that came up, and fair, like, yes, absolutely. It seemed like it was sort of out of nowhere, but also yet somehow totally in character for Vision. But the ship of Theseus thing, like, we are always being changed from one type of person to another. I'm not the same person that I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And all of the things that have happened to me that have changed me, he says, the rot is the memories. Like, all of these things have wounded me and broken me down and taken me apart in some way or another. And so I think that this mourning, this loss, it's not just mourning, the life not lived or the life not realized. It's also, I think, mourning the way that things were assembled, because the ship of Theseus is a thing, and then it's disassembled and put back together somewhere else. Like that configuration, that part of you, the way that you were in 2019 before the pandemic, the way that you were in 2012 when you were just out of college, the way that you were back in 2003 when you were about to graduate high school, the way you were on a warm summer day in 1996, like the way that you were in all of these situations is different, and you're not going to get that back. And so that is a cause for mourning. So even, I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that even if you don't feel like you have a reason to mourn, don't necessarily turn aside the feeling that you are mourning anyway, because maybe what you're mourning is the way that things used to be, and that is also fine. Because I think that in a lot of these cases, we talk about trauma as if it's this one event that has to have happened to you, that you have to have lost someone close to you, or you have to have had a terrible accident that left you handicapped or whatever. But there's also a reason, and it's totally fine for life to just hurt because it changes, right? And I think that's one thing that we don't really deal with a whole lot, and partially fairly, because we have a lot of actual trauma, like direct trauma, to deal with as well. But I think also realizing that, like, the world that was is no longer, and it's going to have to change, and these changes do happen, and that's just the way that it
probably
is.
Leads a lot of us into nostalgia and regression.
Yes, right, absolutely. And I want to go back to what you were saying, where you were talking about being the villain in the story, and is a villainous thing to do. Is it a villainous thing to do to sort of force that version of the world onto your current world, to sort of force the world to be the way that it was back when you were a 10-year-old on the playground or whatever?
Well, it depends on who it affects and how, right? That's a tipping point. If she had one square house that just her and the imaginary people lived in, it probably wouldn't have mattered a whole lot, right? But it took in the whole town. Right. It's that whole misery loves company thing, right? If I'm sad, you have to be sad too. Now, as Christians, we are called to mourn with those who mourn, which is fine. If you're willing to do that, you have the capacity to do that. But forcing somebody to do that and or judging them if they don't, then that's where I think you cross the line and it becomes a bad thing again. But it's like, if part of your mourning process after a parent or a loved one dies is to eat, cereal for dinner for a month. Who's that hurting?
Right.
But if you start like throwing basketballs at the neighbor's house and breaking their windows, that's a little different. Like, yes, let people grieve in their own way, but to the extent that they're not harming other people, right?
So I don't disagree with you, but I do want to point out something a little bit outside the show here. In the Multiverse of Madness trailer, we have Wanda talking to Doctor Strange, and she says that when I do it, I'm the villain. When you do it, you're the hero. And of course, this is referring to a thing that happened in a movie that we're not going to spoil, but it's a very similar sort of thing, like the forced changing of minds, the forced, for good or for ill, there was a change of people. There was a reaction to loss that caused other people to be hurt, and in very real ways, Wanda is being treated differently than Doctor Strange. And I think that, like I said, I don't think you're wrong, but we've got people in Westview saying we feel your pain, and that's not a good thing. Like we feel your pain directly. Your grief is poisoning us, and then and that direct pain. Like, we also see that, like, Doctor Strange is obviously causing that on others as well. Like, that's what the Multiverse of Madness is presumably going to be about. And just to sort of cap all this off, we hear Agatha saying, "Same story, different century. There will always be torches and pitchforks for ladies like us, Wanda." And so all of that put together, I want to sort of tease out what we think the difference is between. Because Doctor Strange is not the first person to have done something like this, right? We were talking about Tony Stark earlier, and about how his decisions hurt people throughout the series. We talked about, we didn't talk about, but we could talk about, other characters like Killmonger, who was actually a villain and yet is maybe even one of the most beloved characters within the MCU. All of these people, like, why is it that Wanda in particular is sort of treated like a villain during the final sort of scenes of WandaVision, do you think?
Well, I feel like my oversimplified answer is storytelling.
Sure.
Right?
Fair.
It reminds me of the thing we learn over and over in becoming a pointless and can't get a job history major. History is written by the victors, right? So whoever is telling the story is going to come at it with a particular perspective, and they can add or leave things as they so choose. Now, again, that's the simplistic answer, because we are being guided into an idea that the things that Doctor Strange are doing, or the things that he is doing, the things that he's doing, are for altruistic reasons. They are outward focused. Like, I'm going to help. I'm going to change these things, or I'm going to change minds to help the greater cause. Whereas Wanda, this is the non-simplistic version. That Wanda is changing minds for selfish reasons. And I think it is not a perfect metaphor, but it is, I think, of note that what Wanda is doing, while it is played off, I think with a very Disney feel, the things that can stand in the place of what she is doing is someone who has someone who's dealing with mental anguish, mental trauma, and physical trauma, and they are choosing to cope with it in a way that causes pain to others. This is like an alcoholic. This is not someone who like drinks and sits in their house by themselves and is only destroying themselves. This is a person who is drinking or doing some type of activity, whether it be a substance like drugs or alcohol, or just living in emotional pain, where they then turn outwards and abuse people, like physical, mental, spousal, sexual, all these types of abuses, spiritual. There's a whole long list of ways that you can abuse people, that are very real and very painful. And Wanda is like physically and mentally abusing people. Like her pain is now turned to torture. And if we saw, and if we retold this story where Wanda was a drunk and the people that she was keeping captive were her children that she was hitting or, forcing to do things that you don't want to talk about children having to do, then we would think she is unequivocally the villain. So it's easy to see why she is the villain. When they, like I said, if she would have, if she would have had one block, right, and it was just her house and her imaginary vision and her apparently manifest children, like then, like she's not hurting anyone else. It's still not. I'm not saying that's a healthy way to deal with trauma. Isolation is probably, we're meant for community, so isolation is usually never the answer. But it's easier to paint her as like a misunderstood trauma survivor, as opposed to a villain. Whereas again, not that Doctor Strange is perfect, but we are painted, or his actions are often painted to, I'm going to make people forget, or I'm going to turn back time so that we can help, we can save, we can do. And when he does do it for selfish reasons, we often see him pay the consequences of them. So what is the difference? I would say the difference is inward versus outward. And this is one of the things that I think is inherent to Christian theology, the motives of the heart, like even if I do something bad, if I'm doing it for good reasons, it doesn't make the actions good, but it doesn't necessarily absolve me of wrongdoing, but at least, I'm not trying to maliciously harm someone, and vice versa. So again, storytelling, we're not seeing all of the small things, and we're not talking about Spider-Man specifically either, but there are people, when you don't get to make that decision, you could also consider that abuse. So we could say that, maybe he's abusing people because they don't get to say in what they want to remember or not remember. Not telling the story that way. And since no one's dying or being held prisoner, it's morally ambiguous. So I'm hoping to expand on it. I saw, you see the trailer, you hope it's different. You hope they make it more gray, because the best villains are the ones that you understand. Their motives are understandable. You relate to them, not anti-heroes, but like true villains who simply have motivations that are real.
Well, and all of that, the reason that you're talking about is part of why I like her sudden wisdom at the end, where she sort of snaps out of it. She releases everyone in Westview, and she, as she's walking out, Monica says, they're never going to know what you gave up. And she says it wouldn't matter. And I think that that's an important thing to remember, that like the motives and the things that you sacrifice are important, and they make a difference to you and to who you are, and they can make a difference to others. But to those that are in trauma, to those who have been hurt, the reason doesn't matter as much. If it's an involuntary pain, it doesn't matter why. All that matters is that it hurts, and all that matters is taking away that hurt, for whatever reason.
Yeah. Oh well, I mean, I said this before. I think if you dive into something that's like 9 to 10 hours long, I mean, you can, we usually can, we've had 2 to 3 hour conversations about 2-hour movies before. So I know we could talk about this ad nauseum, because there are a lot of things that we haven't even hit on. we've mostly just taken like a step back and looked at like the overarching kind of themes, not even interpersonal dynamics, or even some of the characters we haven't even really talked about at all. But like usual, we wanted to keep this consumable.
So, and we're gonna probably talk about the other stuff when we talk about Multiverse of Madness, the Marvels, Loki, What If. All
that's the beauty of the MCU, right? Like you talk about one thing, you're talking about everything, just the way they want it. They've already got us. So I guess the thing that I'm probably most interested in closing are kind of just like, what were your general thoughts of the show? And we've talked about this briefly, but some kind of like a closing statement about WandaVision and how you feel about Marvel's foray into TV, Ryan.
Like I said, it was a pretty good nuanced take on trauma and people dealing with that. Also kind of topical or prescient about it was, again, the head of the sword division attacking her, which has kind of come up with the defund police movement, where they're like, we don't need people being violent against these people who are hurting mentally. We need actual therapy for them, so that way they're not hurting themselves and others. And to see that played out in there, I thought was nice. But yeah, I thought it was almost as strong a step into television as they had with Iron Man into movies. Like, I think they set a standard and said, we belong here, we're worth your time, and you're going to probably want to see where we go from here. So that was my overall impression. They did a good job, and since then, I haven't been sorely disappointed with anything MCU TV related compared to their movies.
Yeah, that's resounding like stamp of approval. I haven't been sorely disappointed with anything they put out.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison too. That's actually, I'm deeply impressed by what a good comparison that is between this one stepping out and Iron Man kind of coming out to the scene.
Yeah, for sure.
What about you, David?
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. I think I agree. It stands up like as one of the maybe the bedrock. Like it was a great place to start Phase 4. I wrote last summer about how the Marvel Cinematic Universe is trying to kill real world theology by making all of their stuff in 2021 about something. It's very much in your face, rather than like trying to sort of like hide it or catch it underneath something else. It's just right there on the top. It's just like, this show is about grief.
Go.
And like I think one of my examples was Black Widow, where they practically like look at each other and say, this movie is about family, and the other one says, yes. And
Vin Diesel comes in from like a whole other scene and is like, family.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was weird that he was on set that day. But the whole thing, this is a great place to start because it really is about something. It is deft and yet not subtle in the way that it presents it. And gosh, I really just love the sitcom aesthetic, especially the 60s. Don't Touch That Dial, episode 2 was just, gosh, I want more opportunities to say flourish in my life, but I don't have enough. So.
Well, now I know that we're going to get a gif of you going flourish. That's the best part. Yeah, I mean, I think it helped that this came out after there was a little bit of a break, right? It was a nice dive back in. It started to get the top 10 lists and get the what's next and get the Phase 4 hints and all the YouTube content, right? All the speculative content. It started getting the train really moving on a whole bunch of that stuff. I mean, it made me interested in what's coming next, and I feel like if you're going to make a TV show or you're going to make something that is part of something else, one of the best things that you can do is make people want to know more. So it gave us a lot. I mean, it gave us a whole lot and yet still, didn't answer every question, didn't fix every problem, didn't create like stupid problems that are kind of like that would actually be sitcom-y. Like in the end, we know, like, oh, if you just had a conversation, this would be over. Like created complex problems that will require 2, 3, 4 new series and movies to come to how convenient, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, thoroughly enjoyable. I was like, this is one of the best things that, at least at the time, that I thought the MCU had produced. I will caveat all that with saying the end was a little bit kind of like eye roll to me. I was like, okay, Marvel really, really does have a problem without making the finale like a giant space laser, and people.
I disagree.
And people punching each other, and not that they can't, and not that they haven't done it, but I think that they have a bad tendency to want it to be like.
No. My objection is that that's not what this was.
Well,
but we can put that in the outtakes.
So the climax is having to be these large CGI spectacles instead of being resolved in some other way. So I know it's not a space laser, but being a large CGI spectacle, almost feeling out of place in a movie that was almost very a TV show that was very personal most of the time. So, but again, that is a small caveat. That was a minor complaint with the interest and enjoyment that I got from this. So it was a great foray. Again, love the Iron Man comparison. It, isn't hopefully going to be the best TV show that they do, but it is a good standard bearer moving forward to kind of say it should all at least be this good. And we've already seen some of it might not be, and some of it has exceeded it. So, so I think that's a great place for it to be, and it makes me want to see the Multiverse of Madness, and it makes me. I mean, it's good enough that I want to watch it again. I think success.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it made me care more about characters that I wish I had seen more of. Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get shows about characters that we don't care about. Sometimes we get shows about characters that we don't actually need to know more about. Again, like maybe Boba Fett or Han Solo or whatever. Like this is a little Star Wars creep, but sometimes the mystery is the beauty. But we didn't want to know more about Wanda. We did want to know more about Vision and their relationship that we didn't get to see. We only got hints of during the films. So good. Winning.
Nice. Well, we don't have the budget for space lasers, so we're going to wrap it up here. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate your likes, your subscriptions if you want to know when it comes out, because we're not the most on schedule every week. So when it does come up, if you're subscribed, hit that bell. It'll send you a little notification. Okay,
I can smash that subscribe button.
You can smash it. You can caress it. I don't care what you do. Keep it between you two. I won't get into it.
Us YouTube novices.
But definitely leave any comments. If you're an expert in trauma and we totally misread something, let us know. Let the audience know. If you've got questions about our takes on it, let us know. We'll try and keep track of that and respond to you in time. If you're looking at us on any of the podcasts, I mean, anywhere you can find a podcast, you should be able to listen to this. So just subscribe, download, listen in your car ride while you're cleaning the house, whatever. And if you do want to support us, you can go to realworldtheology.com/support. We're not really making any money off of this, but if you want to see more content more frequently, that would be a push in that direction. And also, if you want more direct interaction with us, where you know for certain we're going to see it, you can join the Discord. It's in the description, either on the YouTube video or in the podcast. As always, we want to let you know that story is important, entertainment is not mindless, and too many space lasers is a bad thing.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
We now return control of your screen to you until next video, when the Real World Theology podcast will take you to the next conversation.
The end.
Cool. Okay, so no, don't stop recording.